So we were in the middle of discussing cases where you're allowed to keep up possession, and whether now, and the question was, can a non-Jew renounce or not renounce, as well as can an inheritor renounce or not renounce? So on that note, we're talking about inheritance with the last line on Ayin Amud Bet. So Tashma. Yisrael v'ger shruyin v'megura achat u'meit ger m'bod yom afal pi shechazik Yisrael acher b'nechasav u'tzer. So if a Jew and a non and so if a Jew and a convert we're both living in the same building, and then the convert dies on our Shabbos, even though the Jew has in control of his items, it still generates a problem for the purposes of Eruvin. Because normally we'd say that if someone passed away, would go to their son and then they could take their place if they happened before Shabbos. But with the ger, the problem is that nobody is there to inherit from the ger because they have no relative. This means the ger who's not married and has no relative, like has no kids. And if the convert had passed away after dark, majority Shabbos, afal pi shelo hichzik Yisrael acher eino oser. But if he passed away on Shabbos, then it wouldn't be a problem, right? We'd say that it's not forbidden for the other Jew to carry. So hagufa kasha. So we're trying to figure out what's going on here. So amartam odiom afal pi shehichazik lo mabaye kilo hichzik. So on Erev Shabbos, it says even though you have taken control of his area, so it still doesn't work. So why we mentioned in the second case that if you had taken control, like so we've mentioning that the second case you didn't take control, like why would that make a difference? Adarabba, kilo hichzik aser. No, it should be that if you don't have control of the area, it should be aser. So what's going on here? No, it would mean that even if you hadn't, even if a different Jew didn't take possession of it, it wouldn't change the meaning of the Beit. But it says even though you had taken possession of his area. So what does that mean? So I don't understand the whole Beit. Like, what does it mean then? So here's what it means. Even though you didn't gain control of it before Shabbos, you only gain control on Shabbos itself. Since you should have taken control of it before Shabbos, of the ger's area, therefore it's a problem. And now once it's dark, and now it's Shabbos, and now once it's dark, if going to Shabbos, the convert was still alive, but even after dark, even though nobody took over his area, you're still allowed to carry. And the fact that the person passed away will not affect your ability to carry in the future. So now we're trying to figure, okay, so that explains the first half. With the ger. But the question is why the second half of the Beit does say afal pi shelo hichzik Yisrael acher. Why? Then what does it help us say even though another non-Jew didn't gain control? Lo mabaye ki hichzik. What about if another Jew? We had two people. There was the convert and another Jew. So, but where's this other Jew coming in from, right? And why? But what happens if that another Jew, meaning third person, suddenly comes in and takes over where the non-Jew lived, or the non-Jew, the convert? Yesterday was the non-Jewish case, right? So then what's the case? If another Jew comes in, that should make it forbidden because he wasn't part of the area before Shabbos. So when we have the ger and the other Jew, so we've got Eruvin, Shimon, and then we've got Onkelos. Right, Onkelos is the ger. Okay, because Onkelos is a famous convert, so we'll use him. Okay, so Eruvin and Onkelos were living in the same house. They had different rooms, and then the problem is that Onkelos passes away. So now the question is, when he passes away, and does that create a problem for Eruvin or not? So seemingly we said that it comes down to if it was passed away before or after Shabbos. Right, he passed away before Shabbos, so then you have an issue because you should have taken control over his area. But if he passed away on Shabbos, it's not a problem. But now we're mentioning that also Shimon's moving in on Shabbos. So how's that going to affect Reuven's ability to carry when Reuven is now replacing Omos? So how does that work? So should we say that if Shimon comes in, that prevents Reuven from carrying because Shimon couldn't have been part of the Eruv before Shabbos, and now he's here, so he should ruin everything. Amar Papa, Ema Af B'Sheichzik. So our Papa says no. He's like even if Shimon were to come in and take control, it wouldn't be a problem. But it says what? But doesn't it say even if he were to have taken control? Here's what it might say. Rather, if Shimon comes in on Shabbos, it's not a problem because in order for Shimon to create problems, you have to have been there before Shabbos. Since he wasn't, therefore he can't forbid from using the Eruv, from carrying in the house. Wait, so then go back to the first case. So why is it forbidden? Can't he simply renounce his rights? So, right, don't we always have the case that there's multiple people living somewhere that even if it had been forbidden because somebody passed away or is unable to access, we can still solve the issue. You could use bittul. So when we say that it's forbidden for you to carry, we're saying it's until you give up your rights to another individual in the area. So the issue is generated only while you still have your full rights, but once you give up your rights, then it becomes permitted. So now I'm trying to figure out. So now we're trying to figure all these interesting brightos. So who's taught them all? So that we're getting very confused by. So Beit Shammai, these will almost be according to Beit Shammai. Amri ein bittul reshut b'Shabbat, because Beit Shammai says you can't give up your rights on Shabbos, and that's why it's forbidden in all these cases. In the previous case with the convert who passes away, or with the case of the Yorship of the inheritors, that's all referring to. Beit Shammai says you're not allowed to negate. No, as we learned in the Mishnah, as the Mishnah stated, from when are you allowed to give up your rights? Beit Shammai says you have to do bittul or give up your rights before Shabbos, but Beit Hillel says you could even do bittul on Shabbos. So that's how it must be. The people who are saying that you should have done it before Shabbos, you can't fix it now. That must be Beit Shammai. Amrullah, my time at Beit Hillel. So Ula says, why does Beit Hillel say you're allowed to negate even on Shabbos? You give up your rights. So Na'asek Omer Kolach Eitzel Yafog. So it's comparable to the idiom who says turn toward the high quality ones, meaning if a person, this is the case if somebody else has set up promote Masra on behalf of another individual. So you normally want them and the person accidentally takes from the highest quality as truma, but you're not supposed to do that. But then the turn of the owner definitely says, I actually want you to not take the fanciest. I want you to take, the normal quality, like the fanciest ones I had of all my fruit, all my fanciest apples. So because of that, that's why, and then retroactively that affects it. So similarly here too. A person would never have wanted to have forbidden everybody from carrying the courtyard. So we let him do bittul because we know that he would, if he had known, he would have done so before Shabbos. Therefore, if he can even do so on Shabbos.
Rabbi?
Yes.
The situation with the ger who's met is unique. Would it be similar to a situation where someone was making their property hefker? Because that's essentially what's happening with the ger when he passes away, because there's nobody to inherit him.
Correct. Yes. If somebody were to have done properly and been mafker their property, it would have a similar effect.
Yeah.
Correct. right, but that would be a little bit easier because by doing so, he's also in theory giving up his rights to the courtyard, which would go straight over to the other person. Then here the problem is that we don't. That he kind of dies, which kind of loses his ability to transfer things.
Yeah.
In a conscious manner.
Yeah.
So, which gives us a whole bunch of it, which is that's the problem. The problem is we can't ask him what he had in mind when, like, meaning for the Big here, it's very clear they're giving up everything. So it goes all and then you know whatever rights they had, you know. So his area is now nobody's, and the area that was the common one goes to the rest of the common with everybody else because they have control over it. But in our case here, it would lead to issues. So now we're trying to figure out what else did very good point though. Thank you. Excellent parallel. So Abaye, so now our Abaye mate goy b'Shabbat, my kol chayil yafodika. So now we're saying, wait, but if the convert passes away on Shabbos, so what does so then how could you say that the person's changing their mind and you should have done it retroactively? He's dead. How can you have retroactive intent if the person's not alive anymore? So therefore, you can't say that that's retroactive is the way the Bittul works on Shabbos. So rather must argue Bishamai Hill must not be about retroactive, or something else. Bishamai Savri Bittul Reshut Mikna Reshutu. Bishamai thinks that when you are doing Bittul Reshut, you are doing a form of kinyan. Mikna Reshut B'Shabbat Asur. When you and purchasing an area on Shabbos is forbidden. This type of business, you can't do that on Shabbos. But Hillel Savri is the Luke Rishuta Ba'almahu, the Luke Rishuta B'Shabbat Shaperdami. But Hillel says it's all about removing yourself from the usage area. So therefore, you're allowed to you can remove yourself from an area even on Shabbos, and that's the proper thing to do. That's not a transaction. That's simply you're not using something or having access to it. So it's a different type of action. Okay, now we're at the Mishnah. So now we're finally getting back. We've been mentioning now we're finally getting now we're getting to some of the details. Okay, so Baal Abayit Shahaya Shitaf L'Shchenav L'zeh b'yayin l'zeh b'yayin enu tzrichin la'arei. If the person happens to have a shituf, have a partnership with their neighbors, with wine with both of them, and he has basically by default a shituf with his neighbors because they're business partners in a type of food that's eligible for shituf. So then, they don't need to have an eruv because they already have shituf mavot, and that'll cover them. So they don't need anything else. They're considered to be one reshut, one household, one area, and therefore they're good. If you have different partnerships with each of them, one of them is with wine and one is with oil. You need to have an eruv combined between the two, all three neighbors, because you can't make a larger shituf if they're different items. But Rishimon says no, it doesn't matter what the medium is, as long as you all are in partnerships. And even the transitive property, that's good enough. So now we're trying to figure out what is the limitations on Tanakama's opinion of when they're all partners in wine. Or similarly, you could replace wine with them all being partners in oil. So what would be the case? So Rav says, in order for it to work, everything has to be in one container. And Rava says you could infer that also from the fact that the next statement says that if you have one with wine and one with oil, you need an eruv. So I want to say the difference is that the first case is where there's been one, two. That's why it works. The second one there's a two kli. And two containers, that's fine. But Iyamart Reisha Vishnei Kelim, Vishnei Vishnei Kelim, Mali Yain V'Yayin, Mali Yain V'Shemen. So the question is, so what's the difference if you're saying in both cases have two different containers of the food, or I guess liquid in this case. So then what's the difference between having a barrel for each of them versus having what's the difference between having wine in one and oil in one? What's the difference? So the Beit answers, he says, well, the difference is that the court really not really a question of it being in one container. The main issue is could you make an error with what we currently have in front of us? If you have two portions of wine, right, two separate containers, so you could make an error with using these two containers of wine. But if you have one container of wine and one of oil, you can't combine them to make an Eruv, and that's why it doesn't work. Rabbi Shimon Omer, Echad Zeh, V'Echad Zeh, Ein Tzrichin La'arev. So now back to the Mishnah. Rabbi Shimon says, either way, you don't need to make an Eruv. Whether if you have different items that you may have the shituf with. Even if, so the implication of that statement of either way you don't need to have an Eruv means that whether wine or oil, it doesn't matter which one. Right, this is to be a courtyard that is between two different alleyways. Rabbi Shimon Latame, and Rabbi Shimon follows his opinion. None, as Rabbi Shimon says, Rabbi Shimon, Lamad Radoma, L'Shlosha Chatzerot, Duchot Zolazo, Duchot Shotarabim. So this is similar to the case we had of the let me get the diagram up. So when we have three people, here we go. Okay. Here, so this is our case. Okay, so this is the person's courtyard. The courtyard is between two mavois. So this is why we're bringing the concept of using shituf mavoot as well as the concept of as we'd had three courtyards, each of Shotarabim. So it was in here, right? So that'd be, that'd be if each of these were houses, or Shotarabim is where it says Daf Ayin Aleph and Aleph, right? So because I can flip back and try and find the Richard Zero case, but I'm gonna lose it. So let's do this, right? So we get Shotarabim over here, all open into each other, and they also all open into Shotarabim. We're comparing the cases. So in that case, we know Rishon is being very clearly, as he says there. How does that work? Irvu, Chaim, Hachitzono, Imam Sa'id. If the two outer courtyards made an air with the middle courtyard, so if we have the case where there's three in a row, and then the middle one makes an air for the two side ones. The two outer ones would make one the middle one, then the outer ones can access the inner one, but the outer ones can't access each other because they didn't make an error with each other. Wait, how are you comparing those two? Abaye says, how are you comparing those? There it says that the two outer ones are forbidden, yet here it's saying that you don't even need an Eruv. So wait, how are those cases similar? Right? Yes, there's three people involved, and there's two Eruvs involved, but why in one case are you forbidden? In one case, you don't even need an Eruv because you're already connected through a partnership, so through a shituf. So my Ein Tzrichim La'aretz. So what do you mean by you don't need an Eruv? So it says that when we say that there's no need for an error, it means that there's no need for an error between the two people who have the partnership with. So there's Eruvin has a partnership with Shimon, Eruvin has a partnership with Levi. So so Shimon and Levi can both access Reuven's house, but Shimon and Levi can't access each other's houses. Similarly, to get to the three courtyards, so Reuven is in the middle, Shimon on the right, Levi on the left. So Eruvin can access either of them because they both made an Eruv with him, but Shimon and Levi, because they didn't make an Eruv with each other, they can't access each other's, and that's how it parallels. Okay, so that's the difference. So again, so there's three. So where there's three people, two of whom make an Eruv with each other, one of them does not, and that's what generates our issue. Rabbi Yosef Amar Rabbi Shimon Rabbanan Bepluta Rabbi Yochanan Benuri Rabbanan Kameflagi. Rabbi Yosef said there's a machloket between Rabbi Shimon and Chachamim, which parallels the machloket of Rabbi Yochanan and Chachamim. So what's that machloket? So the non is going to Mishnah. Shemen shetzaf al gabei yayin. Naga dul yom b'shemen. Lo pasal ela shemen bilvad. So the Mishnah says that if there is oil and water don't mix, similarly oil and wine don't mix, meaning oil and alcohol. So oil and water and alcohol. The point is that they don't mix. So someone wants to have a fun experiment later, they're welcome to. So again, they won't mix. So then, if a tulio, meaning somebody who had been ritually impure and had gone to the mikvah, but it's not yet, the sun is not yet set, therefore they're still considered to be, for some purposes, tamei. Let's say if this is truma, then they can't touch the truma yet, and if they do, then they touch the truma is now considered to be tamei and unable to be used. So if you touch it, so if you were to touch this tulio, were to touch the shemen or the yayin. So he would create a problem. So let's say he only touched the oil on top. So lo pasal el shem bilvad. So he only made pasal the truma that he touched. That was on the oil was on top. But he doesn't do anything to the wine. Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri omer shnehen chiburim delazeh. Rabbi Yochanan says no, isn't because the two fluids touch each other, they're considered to be connected. So Rabbanan Karabanan, Rabbi Shimon Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri. So the question is, do you say that because they're touching, that they're considered to be the same unit or not? So to parallel that with Eruv, if two people have an Eruv with a third individual, with A is with B and B is with C, so that means that we apply the transfer property. That's Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri. But if you were to say that you can't make the Eruv between all of them, right? That's Rabbi Shimon. But the Chachamim say that doesn't work. That's why you're only the oil is tamei. That's also why the outer people can't carry with each other. Okay, I think that's going to be the end of our using the. Okay, I'm stop share for now. I'll reshare again when we get to a relevant diagram. So okay, so that's what happened, right? So again, the question is does transfer property apply or not? So according to Rabbi Shimon Racham and Nuri, it can apply. According to Chaim, it does not apply. Tanya Rabbi Eliezer ben Tadai Omer echad zeh ve'echad zeh drichin la'arev. Rabbi Eliezer says either way, they'll need in any of the cases of the Mishnah, they'll need to have an eruv. If you lose zeh b'yayin, let's zeh b'yayin, and we're like, wait, even the case of where you have a shita, you have a partnership with both of them with wine. So Rabba zeh b'lagino v'shafach. The Zeba Blagino Shafach, Kule Amalo Bligi to have an Eruv. The Rabbi said, so before it sounds like if you have either the both with wine, it's no good. So then the Rabbi's like, no. It's the only problem because it's in two separate locations. That's why it's not considered to be a combined partnership. But if you were to take each of the wine jugs and pour them into a larger container, let's say barrel. And for both of them, so now they're all mixed up. So then that would be a valid Eruv because they're all considered to be in one location now, and they're all considered to be partners. The argument is if they'd all gone into buying a barrel of wine together. Rabbi Eliezer ben Tadai Savar ein Breira for Rabbanan Savri Yesh Breira. So what happens if they're all partners together? Rabbi Eliezer would say, in rare, you can't dilute parts and therefore it's no good for an Eruv. But Chaim say, yesh beri, it's okay. Like they're all partners in this. So at the end of the day, who takes out which part? It doesn't matter. As like you can decide retroactively, but they're still all currently partners, so it's fine. So Rav Yosef says it's not a question about Breira. He's got a different answer. Rav Yosef Amar Rabbi Eliezer Ben Tadai Rabbanan B'Samchin Al Shituf B'Makom Eruv Kumetzligi. So Rav Yosef says the argument is whether or not you should be relying on Shituf when you could have made an Eruv. Right? So should you have done so which one's preferable to use? So Mar Savar in something, Umar Savar something. Eliezer holds that you're not allowed to rely on Shituf Mava'ot if you had the possibility of doing a normal Eruv. Whereas the Chachamim say, no, you could rely on the Shituf Mava'ot regardless, even if you could have made an Eruv. Again, because nowadays, I don't think anybody's ever heard of anybody doing Shituf Mava'ot. Nowadays, people typically are doing Eruvin, but back in the day, again, depending on the situation, you would normally have both in place. So Amar Rav Yosef, Na Amina Leh. So how do you know this? Right? Meaning like from word to words, why am I saying this is the case? Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Rav, Halacha Rabbi Meir. Rav Yehuda said name of Rav, the Halacha follows Rabbi Meir. Amar Rav Bruna Amar Rav, Halacha Rabbi Eliezer Ben Tadai. So we see that we've seen her statements. The name of Rav, the halacha follows Rabbi Meir, and the halacha is following Rabbi Eliezer Ben Tadai. In terms of the Rav, we look both of them in regards to reliance on the Shituf Mava'ot in place of an Eruv. So my taima, la b'shum l'chad taima. So they're not. So the fact that he's putting both must be that they have the same reasoning behind them. So Amar Lai Abai Ichad. What do you mean? If there's only one reasoning behind them, then why are there two different halachot listed separately? So why do you need to have both cases? Because in Eruvin you normally wouldn't go twice l'chumrah. Therefore, we need both rulings. You may have only thought that it's only with one specific part of the case. So therefore, we restriction for multiple cases. That's why we need both of them. If you could have construed it as being a chumrah, then you wouldn't necessarily toss like that position. So my Rabbi Meir, my Rabbanan. So the question is, wait, so what is Rabbi Meir versus Rabbanan? The parallel machlok we had to Rabbi Eliezer Ben Tadai and Chachamim. So what was that exact machlok? So the Tanya learned in the Beit, Arvin b'chatzer b'pat. Mrazal b'yayin in ma'arvin. So we're making an Eruv chatzerot. So the Beit says that you have, you can do it with bread, but you can't do it with wine. So it turns out what we're allowed to use for Shituf Mava'ot or Eruv is that there's different that we allow things to be used for wine can be used for Shituf and bread can be used for Shituf, but only bread can be used for an Eruv. So then the Mishnah continues saying that if you have that you generally would try and do both an Eruv and a Shituf, because you don't want people to forget about Eruvin. You don't want the children to think that there was no Eruv in place in the area they lived, because then they'll say that our parents did not make an Eruv. That's Rabbi Meir's opinion. The Chum say no, you can make an Eruv or a Shituf, and that's suffices. So I would say, ironically, most people have forgotten Shituf. They definitely have not forgotten Eruvin. So we forgot one of them, but not the one that the Chum word we forget about. So Pligi Abba Rabbi Nachumi the Rabba Tad Amar Bepat Dechule Alma Lo Pligi Debachad Asagi Ki Pligi Biyayin. So Rabbi Rabbi Nechuma and Rab had an argument. So one of them is of the opinion that everybody agrees you only need to use one item for the, meaning that you only need either an Eruv or a sheet, because you don't need both. In the cases, the argument is whether or not you can use wine for both. Everybody agrees bread works for both, but wine is the question of debate. Amar, Yain Dechule Alma, Lo Pligi, Devina Tarate, Ki Pligi, Bepat. Everybody agrees that in regards to if you're making it with wine, you would need to do both an Eruv as well as a Shita, but if you're using it with bread, you would only need, that's a question, if you would even need to bother making both or not. And similarly, Rameir would say that you would still need, you would need both, whereas the Chachamim would say you only need one. Okay, so yeah, no, we keep going for a little bit here. So, okay, so I'll stop. I'll stop in terms of going farther more here, and let's just recap what we've done so far.
Rabbi, sorry, can I just ask a question? Is the wine basically taking the place, the shita for the wine otherwise, is taking the place of the challahs, or is it a whole different concept? For example, if the barrel of wine was a kilometer down the road at a shop that they own together, is that good enough, or it has to be where you?
It has to be accessible in the courtyard.
Okay.
Both for shituf and for chatzer. But then, yes, the question is how similar or different the mechanisms work is a good question. Because it seemingly works very similar, right? Because it's a partnership. One is a partnership, a shituf. One is we all become into one house or one reshut, right? Reshut achat, dira achat, or is it because we're all in a partnership, which you could say is basically the same thing. So the Rambam basically says it's just a question of scale, right? So then an eruv chatzerot is for chatzerot, and a shituf mevoot is for mevoot. They're each just, a question of granularity, right? Because, Chatzar is a couple people around a courtyard, and then a couple of courtyards make up a mavoi. It's the same concept. It's a question of how big is it. So there's no, halachically, there's no difference. But other people say, no, there is actually a difference between the way that they function, because one is a business partnership, and one is they're showing that we are one household, and therefore you can't make parallels between them, because one is business and residential isn't the same thing. So that would be the question of shituf versus Eruv chatzerot. Is it the same concept or not? Similarly, we discussed that the Eruv Eruv Tchumen versus Eruv chatzerot is definitely not the same concept. Right, but because there's a possibility of not even using food for tchumen, and it's a lot of different details. But for shituf, the detail might just be in terms of the medium. As far as everything else, it looks like it's almost identical in terms of everything else that's involved. We might be much so. Again, so the Rambam entirely equates them, and other Rishonim different degrees. The Rambam 100% says they're the same thing, just a question of granularity. Okay, so let's just if anybody else has any more questions, or should I sum up today's topics? Okay, so I guess I'll start with the summary. Okay, so we started talking about the case of the convert if he passes away, and in terms of when he is giving over his rights, when his rights are transferring, how does that work? Does it matter before Shabbos versus on Shabbos? We said that if he died before Shabbos, that would create one issue, because he would have had to go in and take over his area. If the convert passes away on Shabbos, then we wouldn't have such issues, because there's nothing forbidding. And then we said, what if another Jew had come into the picture where that created an issue? And we say yes, because he's somebody who should have been dealt with. That's somebody you should have dealt with prior. We are talking about the case of in terms of bittul, how does it work? The machlokes Beit Shammai and Beit Hillel, if you can do it on Shabbos or not, and we're debating what are the ways that it works. One of the options was based on a question of Brera, retroactively, could you have done so before or not? That was one option. Then we had the opinion of, and it was similar to the case of Truma, that that you could have, that if somebody clearly meant otherwise, that that you could fix their intent. That was one option. So then another option we have is offered by BAYT, is that it's actually based on, it is bittul reshut considered to be a transaction, or is it simply removing yourself from an area? And then that's what we concluded. That is actually based the last thing we left off with is that it's based on the Mahalka Beit Shammai Beit Hillel is Beit Shammai thinks that bittul is a transaction, whereas Beit Hillel simply says I'm no longer having a part of this region. Then we got into the Mishnah talking about partnership versus and do you need an heir? Do you need a shitim avot and an heir chatzerot? Do you need both or one? And how did they work? So we mentioned that if you had a separate one for each of them, we debated if there is a transitive property. Question is there transitive property only when it's the same medium or not? Does it have to be all the same utensil or not? And then and again, different opinions, and so ranging from you have to have in the same container with the same item to being no, they could be different items and that still works. And then we got into the debate of is this comparable to the case of multiple people multiple courtyards making eruvs? And we said that comes down to, do you hold the transitive property or not? You say that because A into B is into C, and therefore that works, or do we say that that's not how it works? That A is to B and B is to C, but the outer ones don't have a connection. Compared to the case of where we have water and wine connected to each other, we say that they overflow and connect, and create one unit, or do we say that no, that you have to have a specific intent in order to connect different regions? They don't automatically, because things are touching doesn't mean that they are automatically blending. Because water, because we mentioned, because the case about the truma, that we said that the wine and the question of machlokes Rimei and the Chachamim, does the water and the wine or does the oil and the wine automatically mix? And that would be the same case for a case of overlapping Eruvin, do they automatically mix? But as far as Halachah said, are we worried about that? The answer is we are not, because whenever we make our Eruvin nowadays, we always make sure to mizake to everybody who can and will, or maybe will, end up showing up over the course of the next year. So we don't. So that's how we circumvent this. This machlokes doesn't really basically saying that everybody is part of it, no matter who they may be, who end up showing up. That way we can avoid that. We avoid that machlokes and that whole issue by simply saying that it also solves a whole bunch of other issues also in terms of the person passed, as mentioned the first case of the ger passing away. So by making sure that everybody has access to this region, just in case either a new person shows up or somebody else leaves, you won't have an issue of somebody coming along and forbidding the whole area.
Sure. Thank you.
Good show, everybody. Happy March.
Thank you.